a lot of these small $5,000, $10,000 a month projects often turn into big things. There's one interesting thing you learn over time. If you can solve a problem for one person well, you can often solve it for dozens, hundreds, maybe even thousands of people as well. And that's how businesses scale out.
You don't end up building massive things overnight. It's an iterative process. So your first side hustle may completely fail, your second might as well, third might as well, but you're learning from each one of them. And as long as you're able to take the lessons from the first one to the third one, the iteration will make you better.
So for today's episode, you might notice that both Hassan and I are sitting together. The reason for that is, number one, we're both in the same country for a change. And number two, both of us are having small technical issues. So for this episode, it's going to be a little bit different. Hopefully, you'll still get as much value out of it. Today, we have a very special episode for you again. One of the questions that Hassan and I get very often, whether that's in our DMs, whether that's folks on the newsletter, whether, when we go to meet people in person, one of the consistent questions we get is, okay, cool, building a company is cool, doing all these big things is cool, but honestly, I just want to make a little bit more money. I just want to have my own side hustle. How do I basically, start my own side hustle? How do I make, that first $1,000, $5,000, $10,000 without having to quit my job? Because, that's totally fair for most people. Like, quitting their job all in before starting a company is quite aggressive. So most people just want to start with the side hustle, a $1,000, $5,000, $10,000 thing. And also some people don't want to be an entrepreneur. They don't want to be doing this full time. They like their jobs. Maybe they like the stability. Maybe they like other factors. They want to keep their jobs, but they want to have a side income. They want to have a side hustle. So today's episode, we're just going to get into it. We're going to talk about how to create your own side hustle.
At the end of the day, right, like a lot of people may have different goals, why they're driven by the side hustle, as then you mentioned, financial independence, financial motivations. But I think also it's very important to remember that a lot of side hustles don't succeed. So your mindset needs to be like of trying, ready to like embrace failure and just keep trying again, because it may not be the first, it may not be the second one, maybe the third one. So I think that is a very critical mindset before you get into even start building a side hustle. And then I think like a lot of questions, there are a lot of fundamental skills you need to like launch a side hustle, but there are two things I think super critical for before you do anything. It's like one is distribution, and the second is product. I don't know, Zain, if you have any thoughts on that, because you've spent a lot of time on distribution as well, spent a lot of time on product, but just love your perspective. Is this like the two fundamental skills for the side hustle?
Yeah, 100%. I think the core thing always is to build something people want, right? At the end of the day, you need to build something, whether it's a product, service, whatever else that is, you have to build something that people want to pay money for, right? And if you want to do that, then the core two pieces to building something people want or something people want to pay for is you need to understand how to build something and then how to sell something, right? So when we're talking about building something, could be a product, could be a service. So for, folks who are super early in this conversation, don't understand what the differences are. Product could be physical, like a laptop, or it could be digital, like an app. And then, with services, basically, that's anything mostly that's linked to your own time or has a person that needs to deliver it. So in this example, if you have, if you have a marketing agency, if you have a PR agency, if you have an HR agency, a recruiting agency, all these examples, and especially agencies are example of services businesses. In some ways, even a job can be a service because a lot of people do contract jobs or part-time gigs and so on. So that can, in some ways, be a service. But I think I definitely would lean more towards the business where you're not employed by anyone else, because if you're full-time employed, then it's really just more of a job. And then you have the distribution part. Cool. You have a product or you have a service that you would like to sell that you think people want. How are you going to sell it to them, right? And I think this is where a lot of different new ventures, new ideas, side hustles basically fail, is you've created something, you think it's valuable, but number one, you don't have any way to sell it. Number two, you don't have any way to validate if anyone is going to pay money for it, right? And that's where distribution comes in. And distribution is just a fancy way of saying marketing or sales, right? It's basically, how do I get in touch with people? How do I send cold emails? How do I DM them? How do I run paid ads? How do I create an organic audience? How do I make things go viral? I think all those things come under distribution. So yeah, I think both thinking in terms of learning the product or service building skills and then also learning the distribution skills. Those are probably the two critical pieces when it comes to building something people want. Attention startups. You can now launch faster with the Google Cloud for Startups program. Get up to $200,000 in credits or $350,000 if you're an AI, as well as expert guidance. Apply now at cloud.google.com/startup/apply.
So Zain, I think there was one interesting point you mentioned, how a job is also service, especially if we're going into like an agentic world. It's 2025. I think a lot of predictions are about agents. So clearly, like a lot of jobs will become products to some extent. And I think people should start learning about AI and should definitely read their newsletter, superhuman.ai as well for that. Because I think the world is going to be significantly different and a lot of side hustles can be built around agents and agentic products. So let's talk about products, right? I think you have digital products, you have physical products. A product could be as simple as something you visit a new country, you see like a really amazing food product, and you're like, hey, let me like bring this into my own country because people will love it. You decide to import it, and maybe like you bring in 100 packages in your baggage when you're coming back. You give it to some friends. They're like, yeah, man, I love it. And now you're like, hey, awesome. Let me go talk to the supplier and bring in 1,000, 10,000. That is like a simple physical product as well. A digital product could be as simple as like, hey, you launching like an e-commerce business producing t-shirts with just say custom names of the individuals who are ordering it, right? So at the end of the day, like a lot of products, there are a lot of different products out there. What you need to do is really think about like, what is the gap you're trying to fill? Majority products don't need to reinvent the wheel. You can try to kind of repackage something, bringing something from abroad to a new country, repackaging something with a new branding, something with a new go-to-market, new marketing strategy. Maybe there's a population segment which is not being served by this specific product. You decided to build a niche thing for that. A side hustle could be like something as great as like for 5K, right? You don't need to like generate $5 million on a side hustle. So a lot of things can be taken from who is already doing very successfully, but taking it into maybe a new segment. So I think for products, that's like one way of thinking about it. Then, if you want to scale it to a bigger side hustle, then maybe you want to build software products, which may require a bit more time, a bit more effort. You may need to like do validation of it before you can launch it. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to identify a gap, see what's working in other areas, be it other industries, be it other countries, see why it's working, learn from it, and then rebrand it for like the specific use case you want to do. That will be a successful combination to kind of identify, I think, a good product for a side hustle.
Yeah, 100%. Before we get into the part about building a distribution, just a quick note on products and services thing. If you're building a product, I think you'd need a lot more technical skill than versus you're building a service. In a lot of cases, services, a lot of times you can just deliver them over a Zoom call, or you need to go to someone's office, but tends to be a lot more about your expertise versus building a product, whether it's physical or digital, needs a lot more technical know-how. So I would say building a product, it does require a lot more technical know-how, but the good news is once a product works, it's independent of your time, right? Whereas in a services are a lot easier to start because in most cases, it's your expertise, something that you already need to know, but it doesn't scale as well as products because it's linked to your time, right? With that being said, I think let's talk about the distribution piece, right? How are you going to do this? There's different ways to sell this product, any product or any service. I think the two main ones are basically paid marketing and organic marketing. Organic marketing essentially is anything that does not require you to spend any money. So that's something like SEO, right? So trying to rank on Google, it's called SEO. Or maybe you have something like an audience. So for example, the way that, when my newsletter business originally was a side hustle, I had a full-time job at the time. The way that I scaled that is I had an online audience, right? So I would basically, I would write threads about AI, and at the end of each thread on Twitter or a post on LinkedIn, I would just plug my newsletter, and that would bring in a lot of subscribers. On the other side of marketing, you have paid marketing. Paid marketing, you need to spend money, right? Paid marketing could be anything from affiliate, where you basically pay someone a percentage of the sales. Could be, paying for Google ads, Facebook ads, or maybe it's something in the physical world, right? Like maybe you're paying for flyers, maybe you're paying for a billboard, maybe you're paying for a TV ad, maybe you're paying for a radio ad, a podcast ad. If it involves you paying money to someone, then you are looking at paid marketing. Now, initially, when you listen to this, you're like, of course I want to do organic. Why the hell would I spend money? Why would I do paid? Well, there are a lot of plus points to paid. The first one is that paid is quick. The great thing about paid marketing is that you can just test something instantly. If you build a product or service, you don't want to be spending 6 months trying to build an audience. In some cases, maybe, but in most cases, that's maybe too long to wait. And the reason why I say that is because you need to validate your product or service. So let's just say you build something and then you try to build, do organic marketing slowly over 6 months. What if at the end of those 6 months you find out that nobody wants your product? Complete waste of time for you, right? So now you need to go back, build a product again, do this again. So, something you can just do is spend a couple of $100 on Facebook ads. Just put up a landing page, see if anyone's actually interested in buying this thing, right? See if people add to products, see how much time people are spending on the website, see if someone makes an order. That is the very first, easiest and quickest way to validate it. We've touched upon marketing. We have organic, paid. The main thing being, it's a trade-off between time and money on both sides. The next one that you have is sales, right? Initially, if it's a side hustle, you probably can't afford to hire other people to do sales for you. I couldn't afford to hire salespeople until very recently. So with sales, basically, essentially it's a human to human thing. You're not using you're not leveraging content on the internet. You're leveraging yourself to talk to another human being and do that, right? Back in the day, it used to be door sales, and it's not the world we live in anymore. Today's sales, if you want to do sales for something, it basically looks more like, either cold DMing on social media platforms like LinkedIn, Twitter, so on, or it's cold emailing someone, right? That's what we call the outbound sales. The next sort of, sales is called inbound. It's basically, where people are contacting you to come buy from you.
Yeah.
But early on, that's not how it happens. Early on, you don't get inbound. Early on, you mostly have to do outbound. You have to reach out to people, build a name, build a distribution or something until it turns into inbound for you. So with outbound, let's just say you've built a service, right? Let's assume in this scenario that you are a recruiter. You're great at recruiting certain types of, let's just say, product designers, right? You excel at this, you're amazing at your job. Your company thinks you do an excellent job of hiring product designers. And what you can do is, if you want to turn this into a service, is you can basically say, hey, I'm going to basically help other companies hire amazing product designers as well, right? Another example is you could be a marketer. Maybe you're excellent at, running ads on Google. You do a great job at your company. Now you say, hey, I can go do this for other people at other companies as well. So now you want to build a service around that, right? And the way to do that is, just find other people who you think would make great customers. So for example, at your company, if the person hiring the recruiter is the VP of HR, or the person hiring the marketer is the, VP of marketing, try to find similar people at similar sized companies on LinkedIn. Reach out to them directly, either via email. There's tools where you can find emails online, but if not, just go to LinkedIn and just click on their profile, just send them a DM. I think LinkedIn with LinkedIn, you need to generally pay for DMs, but a good hack here is if you send someone a connection request, you can also add a message alongside it. So that ends up a way of, sort of like cold DMing someone. So, in a nutshell, that's how I would describe distribution. Marketing, you're looking at organic or paid. And on the sales side, you're mostly looking at outbound sales, and you're looking to do it through either through LinkedIn DMs, Twitter DMs, or you're trying to sell someone cold emails. Ideally, you understand the profile of the person who wants to buy the service, and you are focusing your message on the benefit that they will get from working with you. Don't go into yourself, oh, what this, I've done this, blah, blah, blah. Try to, attack their pain point. So Hassan, let's just say I'm trying to sell you a marketing service. I'll say, hey, I know you're building this app. Hey, I know you'd like to do Google, Google Ads for this thing. I'll reach out to you and I'll say, Hassan, I just use your app. I think it's fantastic. You guys could really benefit from Google Ads. I've helped this other company scale to millions of dollars in revenue or thousands of dollars in revenue. I think this could be great. Let's work together, right? If I'm very early on, I might even put in something and you say, hey, I'll give you a 1 week free trial. If you see results, amazing. If you don't see results, no need to pay me, right? That could be a good way, right? So completely de-risk it for you. If you're like a founder or you're a VP who doesn't have the budget or the time to hire someone full time, then you can just hire me for, instead of paying me $5,000 a month or $10,000 a month, let's just say you hire me for $1,000 or $2,500 a month. I'll come in, I'll pitch you with that on cold DM, Twitter, whatever that is, and I'll see if you're interested in buying, strike up a conversation, get on a call. Hopefully we can work something out, and that would be how I would land my first service client. Building a startup? The Google for Startups Cloud program can really help. Get free credits, training, and resources that'll help you grow. It's ideal for early stage or funded startups. And nearly 90% of GenAI unicorns choose Google Cloud. If you're wondering why, find out more at cloud.google.com/startup/apply.
So Zain, I think that was definitely really interesting point, especially on the services piece, right? Like how simple it could be to break down someone's pain point, tell them hey, I can solve it. And I think the world is moving towards an outcome driven situation as well. So if you can deliver an outcome for someone, solve a key problem, people will love to work with you. I think another also thing is that a lot of people think that, hey, you need to have a product idea, you need to have a ready product before you can start selling. I think because technology has reduced the cost significantly as well, that you can actually start testing ideas without even having a product. You can just put up a landing page, see if people join your wait list, if people decide to reach out to you. Also, you have examples of celebrities, Kardashian, Andrew Huberman, who have built massive distribution and then monetize it very smartly with really meaningful products. Not just small products hey, let me just go sell you a swag, but full on fashion lines and amazing other health products, which are multi tens of millions of dollars of businesses. I think another way to also think about obviously Kardashian and Andrew Huberman are large examples, but let's say you're someone who's just thinking of starting out and you're hey man, how do I go about doing this? I think the best thing about a side hustle, you do not need capital to test out an idea today. You can literally just need your time and skills. So with AI, a lot of the skills can be learned. You can go to ChatGPT and start up a website, or Anthropic and launch a website and start testing out an idea. So I think that's something really important and critical to know. So I think obviously not everyone is Kardashian, Andrew Huberman. So the question is where do you start? So the best place to start is, what do you think you're best at? What are you good at? So a lot of times, your best ideas could be problems you're facing in your daily life, your friends are facing, or in the society you see those challenges. As an example, one of the companies we decided to build, Semantic Health, was a byproduct of me and my co-founders seeing challenges in healthcare, where we were hey, every hospital needs to solve this problem. Today, the problem is not solvable. And how we knew that was not solvable is that we were seeing it on a daily basis because of the work we were doing. So it was in our sphere of professional life where we were interacting with that problem. So a lot of times, a lot of the problems are in front of you. You just need to observe and see them. And that's a very great way of, I think, finding product ideas. Also, another way is that, a lot of times you do not need money to test out ideas. Just, launch web pages, put out wait lists, put out ads on Instagram, or just reach out on email chains to people and friends, or go to Reddit and try to ask questions. I think that's super critical to do. So I think as you kind of talked about briefly about this earlier, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. A lot of products are proven for specific segments, but they're not proven for other segments. As an example, we have been researching some health and wellness products. Those products, there are plenty of brands out there who are working across the globe in that space. They're focused on women, men with specific fitness goals, wellness goals within women, for pregnant women as well. Very similar product. But the key thing is all of these brands have a different branding and a different go-to-market. Yeah. And so what we're trying to identify within this segment is that hey, is there a gap where we can brand something, build a go-to-market around that, which can allow us to generate some revenue. Our goal with this was, this was before we actually started some of the work we're doing now, was hey, can we generate 5 to 10K? So clearly there were a lot of plentiful areas for us to do that. We ended up not doing that. But just if your goal is to generate 5 to 10K, a lot of these type of examples work. But the goal again is that, hey, you need to spend some time, some effort out there, and then pick something and execute and see if the results are in your favor.
I think another common mistake that I see that people make here is people get too obsessed with the idea or too obsessed with the specific type of product. It's always important to remember that what really matters at the end of the day is that the product has to solve a problem for a customer, right? So what you should really be obsessed about is the customer and their problem. So in a lot of cases, you don't even need to build a product. So a good example of this could be, you just gave an example of supplements, right? So in supplements, there are supplements for men, supplements for women, supplements for older people, supplements for kids. And even within, these categories, there are subcategories, right? So for example, with women, there's, women who want gluten-free supplements. There are pregnant women who want certain kinds of supplements. So, it's basically the same product. It's being marketed in different ways to different people. So I think if you, a good way for you to do is always start with the customer, not with the product idea. Most people start with the product idea, and I've been guilty of that several times before, where I have an idea and I'm thinking, oh, this can be amazing. I build it and then no one wants to buy it, and I'm like, oh wow, I just spent like a few months or a few $1,000s and nobody wants this thing. So always start with the customer.
So then I think earlier, like you were just talking about this example, but like one of the other things you mentioned earlier about like services, just clicked in my head, right? Like a lot of our audience are also in emerging markets. So there's a cost arbitrage opportunity there as well, right? Especially in the services space. If you're really good at some digital skill, there's so many businesses and so many individuals out there who need those outcomes. So your easiest way to start a side hustle could be, hey, like maybe your day job is working at a local company. Spend 4 hours in the evening on platforms like Fiverr, Upwork, etc., and find opportunities out there. That could be a small stepping stone. Eventually build your own services business and scale it, or build a small product around that using like AI agents. Just wanted to add that because I think it just clicked that a lot of audience are sitting in the emerging markets. You don't even need to do like these e-commerce stuff. You can just literally do this, and within a month or 3 months, you can have a side hustle of like a few $100s.
I think that's an excellent point. I forgot to mention this, but the Fiverr point is really good because Fiverr is one of those places where there's already a bunch of existing demand. And if you can tap into it, you basically start getting business. And we actually know so many agencies that started this way. It's like someone who was creating websites or designing logos or something along those lines. Suddenly they start getting a little bit of business, then they start getting 4-star, 5-star reviews. And, with time as they accumulate more positive reviews, they get more business. And at some point they got so much business that they actually opened up like a back house agency where they had like 4, 5, 10 people who are working on it. I mean, in terms of Fiverr, it still shows you as that one person, but you got a team of 10 people behind you and you're making tens, sometimes even hundreds of thousands of dollars. But it starts off as a side hustle on Fiverr, which, makes it easier to find customers, and then it scales into something big. I think we've given people a very solid framework to begin with. Again, the point of this was, how do you start a side hustle? How do you make your first $5,000, $10,000? So we generally just tried not to overwhelm you with too much information. We just try to give you like the 5 to 10 basics. If you can get those right, I think you should be able to make $5,000 to $10,000. So why don't you tell us a little bit about, how do you find these ideas, or, and then how do you scale them? And then I'll move into maybe a little bit of mine as well.
Yeah, so I think one of the companies fits really good on this example because both me and the co-founder had like other commitments. One of us was in school, finishing med school. The other one was like in a full-time, pretty intense job. So what we would do is like every evening or every other evening, we'll get together, sit down at my house, just kind of spend time brainstorming ideas, then kind of set up some tasks, go do those tasks for the next 1 to 2 days, come back again with the research. And that process kind of continued over 6 to 7 months, go to cafes, meet people, meet coffees, usually on the evenings or weekends. And after 6 to 7 months, we finally narrowed down an idea which we felt very confident about. Then we started talking to like some potential customers to validate further and ended up raising money around it. And that became a company which ended up going on to like get acquired as well. So the starting process was just like a side hustle. We were like, hey, we kind of know this space has this problem because of these reasons. Let us go validate it further. Let's talk to people. Let's do some research. We think we can build a product around it because the technology already exists. We don't have to reinvent the wheel around research. The combination of those things over a 6 to 7 month period, being dedicated, committed to that idea, ended up resulting in a company which became venture funded and then eventually acquired over a 3 to 4 years period. We could have given up on this process as well within the 6 months, where a lot of people said like, hey, this is like not really a good idea. What you guys are trying to do, this person already does it, this company already does it. And we could be like, hey man, let's just not try it. But we kind of kept at it, right? Like we kept saying like, hey, no, we think there's an opportunity. There's a unique angle here. There's a unique go-to-market. And one thing led to another and ended up building a company.
Yeah, I think those are excellent examples. I remember, you and Nick, your co-founder, would, meet on weekends, meet on evenings, it wasn't like a full-time thing. You guys would maybe sit down for like 1 to 2 hours a day or every second day. And that's how it kind of came about to be. So it definitely wasn't like an all intense, let's leave our job, let's work on this 24/7 and so on. I'll give a little bit of examples of mine because I think mine were like more bootstrapped. I was, in a full-time job and so on. So my first, what I would call a side hustle or side income came thanks to Hassan, because I, was working at a tech startup. I got really good at paid marketing. And what I said to Hassan was, hey, do you have any companies that you can introduce me to that are looking for, someone to help them part-time with paid marketing? Hassan was like, yeah, let me, just drop some folks an email. landed my first couple of clients from there, right? So maybe you don't have an investor in your network who can help you out with this, but if you have friends at other companies, you can just basically say, hey, is your company looking for someone who can help with X, Y, and Z? I can probably do it for a lot less than, them hiring a full-time person. And if you keep doing this, chances are you can probably find, a couple of solid leads that can convert into something. So I would say, when Hassan introduced me those people, I was making somewhere between 2,000 to 2,500 per client. So on top of my salary, I was now earning $4,000 or $5,000 doing these two things, right? Now this started to scale over time. So the second way, I increased my side income is I had been posting on Twitter. I built up a little bit of a following on Twitter. I think at the time I had like 10 or 20,000 followers on Twitter. And at some point, I just said, hey, if anyone would like me to help them, shoot me a DM. Let's see what happens. And I got 4 or 5 DMs. And then 2 of them converted. One of them was just like a one-off where they just needed my help with one project. And another one turned into a more consistent thing, right? So that was like my first side hustle, was basically consulting. My 2 ways, again, that was my service. And then my way to distribute that service, number one, through Hassan, my network. The second way, I was building content at organic distribution. So at this point, a couple of years fast forward, I moved into, creating a LinkedIn audience. I think I had somewhere between 50 to 100,000 LinkedIn followers at that point. So again, I built organic distribution. So now that I have distribution, I can potentially launch a product into this. So the first thing that I tried doing was I tried to, basically say, I write these viral pieces on LinkedIn. And at the bottom, I would just say, hey, by the way, if you want to help building your audience, shoot me a DM. Initially, I started talking to individual people. But while I was doing that, one interesting learning was someone said, hey, can you do this for my company as well? And when I did it for a company for the first time, I realized that companies are actually way more reliable as customers and way more patient as customers and are willing to pay way more compared to what an individual paid. So when I was doing, this agency trying to help people grow their audience, I was charging an individual person like $1,000, $1,500. Then I moved to companies, and companies suddenly became $2,500 to $3,000 clients. In some cases, they were even $5,000 clients. And that's how I basically created that. So, initially, my first side hustle that I talked about was making, 5, 10K a month. That was the sort of like consulting business. Then I had moved into the agency business. And the agency business, we're doing somewhere between $20,000 to $40,000, $50,000 a month. Most months were 20, 30-ish, but there were some months that went up to like 40, 50. And, it was just me and one other person at that time. But that was definitely a much more reliable, a much more better business compared to that. And then, the final business, that I've, kind of recently launched is, the final, the latest, most successful business that I've launched is the newsletter. And again, because I already had that distribution built up, thanks to my audience, I could then plug that newsletter into that distribution. So I created a newsletter, I plugged that newsletter into it, and that newsletter in less than 6 months had grown to over $100,000 in revenue, right? But that was an example of, my journey from going from, consulting services, now a product company. And now Hassan and I are actually, we've known each other for like 15, 20 years now. Now we moved into building a product company as well. I would say that is a little less of a side hustle because there was a lot of major lift there. Like we went funding, we kind of went like the full way. But, we definitely have done a lot of side hustles on the way. And, there's, often a lot of these small $5,000, $10,000 a month projects often turn into big things. Because one interesting thing you learn over time is if you can solve a problem for one person well, you can often solve it for dozens, hundreds, maybe even thousands of people as well. And that's how businesses scale out.
And I think that's like a solid point, right? Like, hey, if you can solve like a problem for one person, you can most probably do it for 10 people, 20 people, 30 people. And then the other point you mentioned, I just want to reiterate like how critical that is, right? You don't end up building massive things overnight. It's an iterative process. So your first side hustle may completely fail. Your second might as well. Third might as well. But you're learning from each one of them. And as long as you're able to take the lessons from the first one to the third one, the iteration will make you better. Like today, like if I have to do like a product idea or a product launch or even a distribution thing, it's night and day for me from even a year ago. Just imagine that, right? Like the skills I've built over the last 12 to 18 months are significantly better now to deploy some of the things. So if you keep at it, you keep building those things, the compounding thing is like one of the wonders of the world, will keep helping you succeed.
Yeah, awesome, guys. So the reason why we do this podcast for these specific episodes is because you are reaching out to us and letting us know exactly what you want us to talk about. So if you have, first, reach out, let us know if you like this episode next. If you'd like us to do an episode on a particular topic, just shoot me an email at zain@superhuman.ai. So that's ZAIN@superhuman.ai. And hopefully, we'll hear from you soon. And we'll probably pick another reader suggestion as our episode for next week. So please reach out, subscribe to our podcast. We'll see you next week. Thanks for joining.